The morning air at Camp Pendleton hung thick with coastal fog as Master Sergeant James Dakota Reed stood before a semicircle of 20 fresh-faced Marine recruits. At 42 years old, Reed was a relic in a young man's game. His weathered hands traced invisible patterns in the air as he spoke about patience, about breathing, about the sacred space between heartbeat and trigger pull. Nobody was listening. A lanky kid from Ohio named Private First Class Tommy Briggs leaned toward his buddy and whispered loud enough for half the platoon to hear. "Reed is washed up, man. My grandfather could outshoot that old-timer." The laughter rippled through the group like a stone skipping across water. Reed stopped mid-sentence. His pale blue eyes, the color of winter sky, fixed on Briggs with an intensity that should have been a warning. The younger Marine just smirked back, emboldened by the crowd. "You got something to say, Private?" Briggs stood up, chest puffed. "Just wondering when we get a real instructor, Sergeant. Someone who actually saw combat this decade. Someone who still has it." The comment landed like a grenade in the sand. Reed had heard variations of this disrespect for months now. Ever since the incident in Kandahar 3 years ago, when a split-second decision during a sandstorm had resulted in civilian casualties. The investigation cleared him. The paperwork said justified engagement. But the whispers followed him back stateside like a shadow he could not shake. They had buried him here at Camp Pendleton, training fresh recruits, far from the sharp end of the spear. At 42, with a bum knee and a chest full of medals he kept in a shoebox under his bed, Reed had become invisible. A ghost teaching ghosts how to kill. The Marine Corps had once called him the Dakota Devil. 73 confirmed kills across 2 tours in Iraq and 3 in Afghanistan. A legend whispered about in sniper schools from Quantico to Kuwait. But legends fade. Heroes get old. And young men always need someone to tear down so they can build themselves up. Reed said nothing to Briggs. He simply nodded, picked up his rifle case, and walked toward the armory without another word. Behind him, the laughter grew louder. That afternoon, Lieutenant Colonel Marcus Webb called Reed into his office. Webb was career military, a man who wore his uniform like a second skin and spoke in clipped sentences that left no room for interpretation. "I am pulling you from training rotation," Webb said, not bothering with small talk. "There is a situation developing. Classified. I need someone with your particular skill set." Reed sat forward. "What kind of situation?" Webb slid a thin folder across his desk. "Domestic threat. A militia group calling themselves the Free State Brigade has taken over a communications tower in the Cascade Mountains, eastern Washington. They have hostages. 3 civilian contractors who were doing maintenance work when these lunatics showed up. The FBI tried negotiating for 16 hours. No progress. They are heavily armed, dug in, and they have threatened to start executing hostages at sundown tomorrow if their demands are not met." "What demands?" "The usual nonsense. Government overreach, constitutional violations, blah blah." Webb waved his hand dismissively. "The point is, we have a window. Intelligence suggests most of them are amateurs playing soldier. But their leader, a man named Cyrus Hatch, did 2 tours as Army infantry before he got dishonorably discharged for assaulting a superior officer. He knows what he is doing. And he has positioned his people in a way that makes a standard assault nearly impossible without casualties." Reed opened the folder. Satellite images showed a steel communications tower rising from a rocky outcropping surrounded by dense pine forest. Terrain elevation maps, weather reports, intel assessments. His eyes moved across the data with the speed of long practice. "Why me?" "Because you are the best I have got, Reed. Because this needs to be surgical. Because those hostages have families who want them home alive." Webb leaned back in his chair. "And because I think you need this." Reed looked up sharply. "I know what they say about you down in the training yard," Webb continued. "I know you have been getting pushback from these punk kids who think a couple months at sniper school makes them operators. I also know what you did in Kandahar was the right call, even if the brass made you the scapegoat to smooth things over with the locals. You are not washed up, Reed. You are just rusty. This is your chance to remember who you are." Reed closed the folder. "When do I leave?" "Tonight. Hello lifts off at 2100 hours. You will link up with an FBI tactical unit already on site. Rules of engagement are crystal clear. You have authorization to use lethal force to neutralize threats and protect civilian lives. But Reed, this is not about revenge or proving anything. This is about bringing those hostages home. Understood? Understood, sir. As Reed stood to leave, Webb called after him. And Dakota? Show those kids what a real Marine looks like. The Black Hawk cut through the night sky like a blade through silk. Reed sat in silence, his rifle case secured between his boots, watching the lights of Seattle fade into darkness below. Across from him, 2 FBI tactical operators scrolled through their phones, barely acknowledging his presence. When they landed at the forward operating base, a hastily assembled camp of vehicles and tents 3 miles from the target site, the reception was ice cold. Special Agent Laura Chen, the FBI commander on site, looked Reed up and down with barely concealed skepticism. "You are the Marine Corps solution?" she asked, not bothering to hide the edge in her voice. "I requested a full tactical team. They sent me one middle-aged jarhead with a limp." Reed ignored the comment. "Brief me." Chun led him to a tactical map spread across the hood of a Suburban. "The Free State Brigade has 9 confirmed hostiles holding position around the communications tower. Cyrus Hatch and his second-in-command Marcus Wolf are ex-military. The rest are weekend warriors with more ammunition than sense. They have the 3 hostages zip-tied inside the tower control room at the base. Cameras show they are alive but terrified. Hostage names? David Brennan, communications technician, age 34. Sarah Kim, engineer, 29. And Robert Valdez, contractor supervisor, 56. All civilians. All just trying to do their jobs when these lunatics decided to make a statement. Chun zoomed in on the satellite imagery. The tower sits on an elevated ridge. Approach from the south is exposed. North side has cover, but the terrain is brutal. We have had snipers trying to get clean sight lines for hours. The militia positioned themselves smart. Overlapping fields of fire. Anyone tries a direct assault, those hostages die first. Reed studied the terrain with the intensity of a man reading scripture. His finger traced elevation lines, noted wind patterns from the weather data, calculated angles and distances. What about the east approach? Through that ravine? Chun shook her head. Too narrow. They would hear us coming from a mile away. Plus it funnels into a natural kill zone at the base of the ridge. Reed zoomed the image closer. There. A small depression in the terrain about 800 meters from the tower base. Heavy brush coverage. If I can reach that position before dawn, I will have overlapping sight lines on at least 6 of their positions. You are talking about moving through 3 miles of mountain forest in pitch darkness. Reed, with that knee of yours? Chun crossed her arms. Even if you make it, 800 meters is a hell of a shot. Multiple targets. Low light conditions. And the second you fire, they will know where you are. Then I better not miss, Reed said quietly. Reed moved through the darkness like smoke through trees. His knee screamed with each careful step, but he had learned long ago to build a wall between pain and purpose. The forest was alive with sounds. Branches creaking in the wind, the distant hoot of an owl. His own controlled breathing barely louder than a whisper. It took him 4 hours to cover 3 miles. When he finally reached the depression he had identified on the satellite imagery, the first hints of dawn were bleeding into the eastern sky. He set up his position with the methodical precision of a man who had done this 1,000 times. Rifle bipod secured. Range finder positioned. Wind gauge checked. The communications tower rose like a steel skeleton against the lightning sky, exactly 817 meters away. Through his scope, the world compressed into crystalline clarity. He could see 3 militia members on the tower platform itself. 2 more positioned behind concrete barriers at the base. Another walking a patrol pattern along the western perimeter. Amateur movements. Predictable. Sloppy. His radio crackled softly. Reed, this is Chun. We have visual on your position. How does it look? 6 targets visible. 3 more must be inside or behind cover. Hostages still in the control room? Affirmative. Thermal imaging shows all three alive. But Reed Hatch just issued another ultimatum. He wants the governor on the phone in 1 hour or he starts executing people. We are out of time. Reed adjusted his scope for distance and elevation. Understood. I need you to create a distraction. Something to draw their attention west. When they turn, I will have my window. What kind of distraction? Use your imagination, Agent Chun. Just make it loud. There was a long pause. You are really going to try to take out multiple targets from 800 meters in rapidly changing light conditions? Not try, Reed said softly. I am going to do it. Because those people down there did nothing wrong except show up for work. Because David Brennan has a wife and 2 kids waiting for him. Because Sarah Kim just got engaged last month. Because Robert Valdez was planning to retire next year. They deserve to go home. And these militia bastards picked the wrong day to play soldier. He settled into his shooting position, feeling his heartbeat slow, his breathing deepen. This was the place he had lived most of his adult life. The space between thought and action, where milliseconds stretched into eternities and the world reduced itself to geometry and wind and the simple mathematics of distance. If you are watching this and hoping these people make it out alive, Reed whispered into his radio, knowing Chun was recording everything for the after-action report, then stick around. Because what happens next is going to remind everyone why they used to call me the Dakota Devil. Chun did not respond. But somewhere in the western tree line, Reed heard the distinct thump of flashbang grenades detonating. The distraction had begun. The flashbangs exploded like artificial thunder across the western ridge. 3 militia members on the tower platform immediately spun toward the sound, their rifles raised, shouting coordinates to each other. The 2 behind the concrete barriers broke cover, moving toward the perceived threat. Reed exhaled half a breath and squeezed the trigger. The first shot dropped the leftmost militia member on the tower platform. He crumpled without a sound, his rifle clattering against the steel grating. Before his body hit the ground, Reed had already adjusted, found his second target, and fired again. The man next to him collapsed backward, his arms spread wide like a failed angel. The third man on the platform finally registered what was happening. He turned, scanning desperately for the shooter's position. Reed's third shot caught him center mass as he moved. 3 down in 8 seconds. Now the chaos began in earnest. The militia members at the base started screaming, scrambling for cover. One made the fatal mistake of running toward the tower entrance, exposing himself completely. Reed's fourth shot sent him spinning into the dirt. A voice crackled over the militia's open radio channel that FBI was monitoring. We are under fire. Sniper! Sniper on the eastern ridge. Hatch's voice cut through the panic like a knife. Return fire. Suppressing positions now. Muzzle flashes erupted from behind the concrete barriers. Rounds snapped through the air above Reed's position, thudding into the trees behind him. He adjusted for the incoming fire, found the source, and sent his 5th round through a gap in the barrier. The shooting from that position stopped. 800 meters. 5 targets down. 4 remaining. Movement caught his eye. A militia member was dragging something toward the tower entrance. Not something. Someone. Reed recognized the man from the intelligence photos. David Brennan, the communications technician. The hostage. The militia member was using Brennan as a human shield, backing toward the control room entrance. Reed could see the terror on the civilian's face, could see his lips moving in what might have been prayer or pleading. Chen's voice exploded in his earpiece. Reed, do not take that shot. Too risky. We need to negotiate. But Reed had already done the math. Wind speed 4 miles per hour from the northwest. Target moving at approximately 2 feet per second. Hostage height 5'9". Captor height approximately 6'2". Exposed target area. 73 square inches of head and shoulder visible above and beside the hostage. His father's voice echoed across 20 years. Sometimes, son, the right thing and the hard thing are the same thing. And a man who won't do hard things ain't much of a man at all. Reed centered his crosshairs on the narrow sliver of skull visible just above David Brennan's left shoulder. He breathed out, found the space between heartbeats, and fired his 6th shot. The militia member's head snapped back. He dropped like a puppet with cut strings. Brennan collapsed to his knees, alive, sobbing, free. The remaining 3 militia members broke. Reed watched through his scope as their coordinated defense disintegrated into pure survival instinct. One threw down his rifle and ran blindly into the forest, hands above his head, screaming surrender. Another dropped behind a water tank, frozen, no longer shooting, just hiding. But Cyrus Hatch was different. The militia leader emerged from the control room dragging Sarah Kim, the engineer, by her hair. He had a pistol pressed against her temple. His voice boomed across the compound, raw and desperate. "Show yourself, sniper. Show yourself or this woman dies right now. I will paint these rocks with her brain. You hear me?" Reed kept his crosshairs steady on Hatch's center mass. But the angle was wrong. The hostage was directly in front of him, blocking any clean shot. Hatch was smart enough to keep moving, never staying still, never giving Reed the window he needed. Chen's voice crackled urgently. "FBI tactical units are moving in now. 2 minutes out. Reed, hold your fire. Let us handle this." But 2 minutes was an eternity. Reed could see Hatch's finger tightening on the trigger. Could see the absolute terror in Sarah Kim's eyes. She was 29 years old. She had gotten engaged last month. She was supposed to be picking out wedding venues, not staring down the barrel of a gun held by a broken man with nothing left to lose. Through his scope, Reed noticed something. Every 4 seconds, Hatch's patrol pattern brought him past a sheet of corrugated metal leaning against the tower base. For a fraction of a second, when Hatch passed that metal, it reflected his image like a warped mirror. It was insane, an impossible shot. Not at the target itself, but at his reflection. Banking a bullet off corrugated steel at 800 meters. The physics alone were absurd. The margin of error was microscopic. If he miscalculated the angle by even a degree, the round would either miss completely or strike Sarah Kim instead. Reed closed his eyes, breathed, opened them again. He adjusted his aim 6 inches to the right of Hatch's actual position, targeting the spot on the corrugated metal where the reflection appeared. He calculated the angle of deflection, factored in the bullet's velocity loss, the unpredictable nature of the metal's surface. His instructor's voice from sniper school 20 years ago whispered in his memory. Sometimes the impossible shot is the only shot you have got. And when that moment comes, you better be willing to take it. Reed squeezed the trigger on his 7th shot. The round struck the corrugated metal with a sharp crack. The bullet deflected at a 47-degree angle and caught Cyrus Hatch in the right side of his neck. He released Sarah Kim and dropped to his knees, his pistol falling from his fingers. The woman scrambled away, alive, crying, free. The final 2 militia members threw down their weapons immediately. It was over. 6 months later, Master Sergeant James Dakota Reed stood in front of a different group of Marine recruits at Camp Pendleton. The morning fog had burned off early, leaving the training range bathed in golden California sunlight. 20 fresh faces stared back at him with something that looked like respect, maybe even awe. The Cascade Mountain operation had changed everything. The helmet camera footage from the FBI tactical team, the recordings of his radio communications, the impossible geometry of that final deflection shot, it all went viral within military circles. News outlets called it the most remarkable display of precision shooting in modern combat history. 7 targets neutralized. 3 hostages saved. 0 friendly casualties. They were calling him the Dakota Devil again. But this time, Reed did not need the nickname. He knew who he was. Among the new recruits sat Private First Class Tommy Briggs, the kid from Ohio who had mocked him 6 months earlier. Briggs had requested transfer specifically to train under Reed. He sat in the front row now, notebook open, hanging on every word. "Patience is not weakness," Reed said, his voice carrying across the assembled group. "Precision is not the same as hesitation. And experience is not something you earn in a classroom or by tearing down the people who came before you. It is written in the choices you make when everything is on the line and lives depend on you being better than you thought possible." After the training session ended, Briggs approached him. "Sergeant Reed, I owe you an apology. What I said before, I was out of line. I did not understand. Reed looked at the young Marine for a long moment. You were scared, Briggs. Scared that you might not measure up. Scared that the legends you heard about might be better than you will ever be. So you tried to tear them down to make yourself feel bigger. I get it. I was 22 once too. How did you make that shot, Sergeant? The deflection shot. Everyone says it was impossible. Reed picked up his rifle case. I did not think about whether it was possible or impossible. I thought about Sarah Kim going home to her fiancé. I thought about David Brennan reading bedtime stories to his kids. I thought about Robert Valdez getting to enjoy his retirement. When you stop thinking about yourself and start thinking about the people counting on you, impossible becomes just another word. He started walking toward the armory, then paused and looked back. Oh, and Briggs? Do not call me a legend. Legends are dead people who cannot disappoint you anymore. I am just a Marine who showed up, did his job, and got lucky that the wind was blowing the right direction. Now get back to training. Those targets are not going to shoot themselves. As Reed walked away, he could feel Briggs watching him, and for the first time in 3 years, the weight on his shoulders felt a little lighter. Some men spend their whole lives trying to prove they still have it. Reed had simply reminded everyone he never lost it in the first place.